everybody. I am Lauren Cohen, the host of Investing Across Borders, an international lawyer, speaker, cross-border expert, realtor, and franchise broker. Yes, I do a lot. But so does my friend Jannette, who's here with me today, who I will introduce in just a moment. At Investing Across Borders, and actually I have Jannette to thank for our tagline, we teach you how to invest, live, work, and play across borders. And I originally met Jannette in person on the Marketers Cruise right before COVID, where half the ship got COVID and didn't know it. So, and I thank God was not one of them, but I was struck with COVID in August of 2020, yes. And my throat has not been the same since. So as you hear the hoarseness in my throat, it's from long COVID, and it went away and it came back and it went away and it came back. And here it is again. Anyway, our podcast is all about teaching people how to accomplish their goals across borders, and there's no better person to talk about that than Jannette, who is one of my business coaches, by the way. And we would invite you to subscribe to our podcast and all of the major podcast channels as we bring you amazing guests on a kind of every 3-week basis. And that's largely because of my voice, although we are considering bringing in somebody to help alleviate that issue. But in the meantime, let me have no further ado in introducing my good friend and coach and mentor and just an all-around great girl, Canadian girl, a fellow Canadian girl, Jannette Anderson. Jannette, please say hello to our audience and introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody, and I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, Lauren. And I love your perseverance despite all of the challenges with the long COVID and so forth. I still have a cough a year later. Yeah, ever so lovely.
COVID like literally beats you. And I was just on the phone a little bit ago because I have this kind of I guess it's a nutritionist doctor. He helps with like anti-aging and all this kind of stuff. And I met him through the coaching program that I'm in in San Diego. And he said, you know, what can we do about your throat? And I go, well, do you have a solution for long COVID? Because if you do, then I think we'd all be very excited to hear about it, because nobody really has a solution. And if I tell you how many doctors and specialists and ENT and top University of Miami, top people went to speech therapists, you know what? There's no solution. You just have to live with it and learn to find ways to work with it. And I think that that's the key. Just like you said, perseverance, and we have to persevere through these things. And, you know, COVID didn't beat us, and we're here to tell about it. So we have to just be a little stronger for it and fight it a bit harder. But Jannette, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself rather than me spewing out your bio, which is not that exciting for me to do and much more exciting for you to share.
All right, so let me see, where can I start? Okay, I think I came out of the womb entrepreneurial. I'm sure I was carrying a briefcase, which my mother did not appreciate. I've been entrepreneurial my whole life, had my very first business when I was 4, almost 5. Had a garage sale, and I really love supporting entrepreneurs. Have been doing it for over 40 years, and love business in general. It's one of my favorite juicy topics. The other half of my life is personal development facilitation, teaching, coaching, certification programs. So what I really love is the combination of getting the 4 inches between your ears working so the business can work. Because really a lot of what gets in the way of people being successful is limiting beliefs and their inner game. I call it mastering the inner and outer game. I call myself polyhomerous, which just means that I'm homeless. I used to say that, but people would get all distressed. I sold my house and everything I own over 8 years ago, and have been living variations on the digital nomad lifestyle ever since then. So have lots of experience with the pros and cons of that lifestyle and what to do, and things that people wouldn't necessarily know or think about when they're relocating, or if they want to live a mobile lifestyle or just move to a different country, a different place. So yeah, I've traveled a lot. I've been in 33 countries so far and counting, every state in the US, every province in Canada. I get around a lot. So, and I love it. I love traveling and finding new communities, new adventures, new experiences. Been doing it most of my life. So love combining the two as well, which is why I chose a mobile lifestyle, so that I can, I'm pathologically allergic to winter, and so I finally
I
created a
can
little.
relate to that. I
Yeah,
mean, I was just on a Zoom with it's called Toronto Professional Women's Network, and I'm doing an event in Toronto on April 10th, and which is before this podcast will come out. But I was like, if there's snow, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because I'm not gonna leave the house. Like, I don't know how we're gonna have this event downtown, and I'm not leaving the house, so it's gonna be very challenging. So please no snow. Okay, just putting it out there ahead of time and after the fact. And yeah, I'm definitely allergic to the cold and the snow, and that's why I live in Florida. So I may not have a mobile lifestyle, although in a way I think we share that, certainly that entrepreneurial zest for being mobile. And I'm as mobile as I can be, considering the fact that I'm a single mom of a 12-year-old boy who needs to be in school, and did not do so well when we had online school at all. He needs to be with his friends, and he's a very social kid, and he plays baseball. But other than that, I think, considering my circumstances, that we do a pretty good job of being pretty mobile, and going away for 6 weeks in the summer with my laptops in hand. And I say laptops because you just never know if you need more than one. So
yes, exactly.
right.
Yeah, and you do travel quite a lot for your work and get around a lot, and there's a lot of different variations on the mobile lifestyle, or being a digital nomad or living that kind of lifestyle. So lots of variations.
And I think it's become, well, certainly, I know for a fact that it's become much more popular since COVID, when people realized that they didn't have to be tied to a desk. And that's when Florida, I mean, people started moving here in droves because they could be working with a company in New Jersey or New York or Toronto or wherever, and living in a warm place and not having to deal with the winter. And it certainly had an impact on the housing market, which has affected me in a lot of ways. But yeah, so it's just a very interesting thing to see how the world has now shifted to make what you're doing less unusual, because probably for the first 20 years that you were doing this, or you said you sold your house 8 years ago, so let's say the first 5 years people were probably like, what is with this woman, like what are you talking about? She doesn't own a home, she doesn't own anything, her stuff is all in her truck. How is that even remotely possible? My mother would love it because she has no interest in having anything at all. She got rid of all our stuff before we even knew that she was getting rid of it, or gave us a chance to look at it. And we were like, what happened? So she moved from our house into this tiny little apartment. Now she's with her boyfriend, and they don't have a tiny little apartment anymore. But that was a little crazy. She was in the studio apartment and all of our stuff was gone.
Yeah. Well, that was unfortunate. She didn't give you a shot at it first, but
did not.
But I bet you she felt a lot lighter afterwards.
A lot lighter.
Yeah, when I sold, like, I had a 2,700 square foot, 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom home, and a double garage that was stuffed to the gills with stuff. And I know it was quite a process, actually. I wanted to travel to, so there's a story. I wanted to go to South America my whole life. I always wanted to go there. I talked about it incessantly for like 25 years. My best friend made me a birthday cake one year that was South America.
Anywhere specific in South America, or just like everywhere?
The whole country.
The whole continent, okay.
Yeah, and so, or country, or continent. And so I talked about it, but there was always, well, I don't have enough money to do it now, even if I've got the time, or I don't have the time because I'm working a very busy job, or I have, my business is busy or whatever. And so there was always some excuse, some reason why, oh, I don't have someone to go with. Oh, I can't do it because I've got this obligation and I'm doing this event or whatever. And so for 25 years, I talked about this. And finally, I got tired of listening to myself talk about wanting to do this, make this change, right? Wanting to go do this thing that was important to me. And so finally, one day I asked myself a much better question. I said, okay, well, if that wasn't true, I forget what the excuse of the day was then, but if that wasn't true, then what? And my answer was, well, then I'd go. And so the next question was the most important one, was, okay, how do I make that happen? Because when we're focusing on all the excuses and reasons why we can't and so forth, of course, nothing happens. When we focus on what do I want and how do I make that happen, it shifts everything. So literally from the time that I asked that question to the time that I landed in Belize, it was 3 months. And that was after almost 27 years of talking about it and not doing anything about it. So from the time I asked a better question to the time that I was doing the thing that I'd always wanted to do, 3 months. And probably would have been sooner, but I had to finish some stuff up. So, and then I traveled through Central America for 4.5 months by myself and South America for 2.5 months. And then some trips to Greece and so forth on that particular trip. So 7 months in Central and South America. And it was a phenomenal trip. It was awesome. Lots of adventures, lots of zip lining, lots of doing all sorts of cool, adventurous things. And it was the beginning of getting that if you set a clear intention and you focus on how do I make it work, you can go wherever you want and do what you want. You just have to commit and then get busy on taking action despite all the limiting beliefs that might be coming up.
Yeah, so that's really important and relevant for me and for my listeners, because at the end of the day, we often are the ones that get in our way.
Yes.
And Jannette got in her way for 25 years.
Yeah.
And now she helps people shift the way that they think about the way that they do business to and this is where she gets her title, the expansionist, because she really is the expansionist, and she makes you think about a bigger picture and expand your mind. And I remember sitting at that table on the marketers cruise with you and Stacy, who was your roommate on the last cruise that I was not able to go on. Yeah. And sitting at that little tiny table, and I was literally relaunching my business at the time because I had developed something called Scale Up Checkup. And I thought that this was going to revolutionize the way that people did business. And it could have if I had a couple of $1 million to invest in the portal that I needed to build. Yeah. It was a great concept. But anyway, it wasn't meant to be. I was meant to do what I'm doing, which is really where my heart is. I mean, bringing Canadians and others to America, it's like it kind of fits, And so we sat at this table, and I don't even remember how it came up. I think it was because we each had to speak at the marketers cruise. We each had like a 2 or 3 minute intro. Yeah. And we were just kind of chatting about it, or maybe it was after my intro. And suddenly she said, "You really are about invest, live, work, and play." And I said, "Huh? What are you talking about?" And I remember thinking, where is this woman coming from? And then it stuck. And that is my tagline. And so she is literally responsible for my tagline, how to invest, live, work, and play across borders. Yeah. And Janette is responsible for a lot of amazing ideas that you can't help herself but come up with. That's really what it comes down to, because even if you shut yourself down, it's kind of like me. If somebody's telling me I can't figure out how to get to America, I'll be like, okay, really? Yeah. Like, because we just can't turn off that piece of our brain that thinks that way. And I think that you've made a difference for so many, especially so many women, but also so many men, because even though you focus on helping female entrepreneurs, there's definitely a derivative that goes over to the men. Yeah. And I
work with female entrepreneurs and a few good smart men.
And a few good men, exactly, that are smart enough to realize that she has special gifts. Yeah. And to take the risk of going and selling your home and getting rid of everything. Listen, I just moved. I had to move. I had issues with I had rented a home. I sold my house. I had rented a home, and there was mold, so I had to move. And in doing so, it's not that easy to find somewhere here in South Florida, and I wasn't ready to buy because the market hasn't shifted enough. And I ended up falling into a great opportunity at a furnished home. And it's beautifully furnished, but not kind of made a dent in my plan, because where's all my stuff going to go? Yeah. And I got rid of a lot of stuff, like considering it's me, and purging is one of my biggest challenges. I did a great job, and it did feel like I love when I get rid of stuff. Like it's an amazing feeling, and it feels like you are getting a weight off your shoulders. So, and it goes through, it pervades from your personal life into your professional life.
Totally. And I actually really want to recommend to people, if you're wanting to move, if you want to create or invest and create more wealth and work with someone like Lauren to do that kind of thing, one of the things that's counterintuitive, but one of the things that will help you create more is to get less. And so to create more, you need the space for that. And when so the getting rid of my house and everything was kind of a 2-year process of
It's okay.
I forget if I'm talking to Canadians or Americans, so which one
both.
Yes. Then so for instance, I had 2 garage sales, and in one garage sale I sold $1,600.
Well, you were an expert at garage sales from the time you were 4.
Exactly. I had one that was $1,600 worth of stuff, and there was only 5 items over $10. So can you imagine how much crap that is?
A lot of crap.
I had 800 books, 300 CDs, every art and craft you can think of. Like, I moved 27 times in the first 29 years of my life. So when I finally bought
Oh my God. And you moved all that stuff every time?
No, not that. No, the first 27 years of my life, I moved a lot, my mom and a variety of different kinds of things. And so when I finally bought a house, I did what I call power nesting, which is, probably just a side of hoarding, but I just had like a lot of stuff that I love. Big, huge plants. And it was so funny, Lauren, because it took quite a bit to be willing to let go of the house and the notion of home in order to and really I got to the point where I realized my stuff owned me. I didn't own my stuff.
Yes.
And I decided that was no longer okay. So, I came home from a trip one time and I thought, that's it, I'm going to sell everything. And I had these big, beautiful, like, tree plants in my house. I had many of them. It was beautiful and lush. And I looked at my plant and I burst into tears and I was like, I don't want to get rid of my plants. And then I paused for a moment and I laughed and I said, really? You can't have your ideal life because of a ficus? Really? That's what's going to stop you as a plant? They have plants in other places, right? So I had this little talk with myself. So we all have our stories about and attachments to things that, until we figure out that, it's okay, I can let go of those attachments, and that's not where my safety lies. It's not, and we recognize, I often say, there's that saying, home is where the heart is. But I say, if you really want to create a new life, like move to the US or do something different, you have to switch it and say, heart is where the home is. Wherever my heart is, I'm home.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm happy somewhere, if I'm connecting with people somewhere, then I'm home. Home is not a house. Home is not a whatever it is, right? Home is a sense of belonging, a sense of connectedness, and of being who we want to be. So I did these garage sale. I did another one a year later, $1,200, 5 items over $10. And so a lot of stuff went to Goodwill, a lot of stuff went to the dump, a lot of stuff went to friends, so that I could get everything down to a 10 by 10 storage unit, which was quite the feat. But I got to tell you, it was incredibly liberating. And I got to the point where I really realized that my stuff had been owning me and stopping me from being who I wanted to be, doing what I wanted to do, and having what I wanted to have. And I think we get kind of, our culture of more creates a whole bunch of not enoughness. And so when we let go of the more, and I'm not saying you have to be like, I love luxury. I love, my funky truck and all sorts of stuff. I'm not advocating that you have to be, a pauper and wander around with a bowl, a begging bowl, but we just probably want to get clear on what really matters to us. And are we being limited by things rather than deciding what we want to commit to, who do we want to be, and how are we going to make that happen in the world? So for me, that was the journey. It's not for everyone, right? For some people, they want to live in Canada and keep their their Canadian healthcare and summer or winter in Florida, that's awesome. Do that. But just
By the
stop.
way, we have great healthcare options, so you don't have to worry about that. 'Cause that is something new that we are so excited about, because before, it's true, Canadians are attached to their healthcare, and I can't say I blame them a lot, because healthcare in the US until recently kind of sucks. But
Yeah,
there are options, just like with anything, it's all about finding the solutions, okay?
exactly.
And that's what Jannette does so well, is helps you find solutions rather than excuses. And she does really bring light to things that you may not have thought of, because she thinks outside of the box. I mean, she's an entrepreneur at heart. She has a mobile lifestyle. She doesn't own a home. She puts all her stuff in her truck and she's off. And that takes guts. Like our friend Nancy Matthews, a visionary with guts. Well, definitely, I would say Jannette definitely qualifies as a visionary with a lot of guts.
That's true. And it takes guts to work with you and to do things like invest in another country or buy a home in another country or move, to be willing to say yes to ourselves.
Yes.
And then take action on that does take courage. But what's the alternative?
Exactly.
Life.
So, it's interesting that you bring that up. Do you know what is the opposite of fear?
Well, depends who you ask, but I'd say willingness.
Comfort.
Comfort, okay. Well, and
now, we learned this in Israel. And the reason that this is a way of thinking is because comfort means that you just kind of stay where you are. But face your fear and do it anyway, is about coming out of that comfort zone and being uncomfortable. So getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, which is certainly what Jannette discusses. And another thing, Jannette's events are all about action and taking action, because we see every single day, I have people say, like if I had $1 for every time that I have somebody that reaches out to me and says, I want to move to the US. Okay, great. Here's your steps. And I give them a step or whatever, and they disappear. Why? Because they either want free advice, or they want the easy street, or whatever. And it's not like I'm saying, oh, it's going to cost you $1 million. I just say, this is your first step. And if they aren't going to take that first step, like they're never going to take the next step, because and it's a process, right? And everything is a process. You're not going to come up with your ideal business overnight. Maybe somebody will, maybe the guy who created Google, or Elon Musk, I don't know. But at the end of the day, even Jeff Bezos went through a process to develop Amazon. He didn't come up with the idea overnight and created everything around it. And then now, he added Whole Foods. Like, it's always a process. And I think that that's something that we all have to learn, because we all want instant gratification, especially our kids. My son is on that damn phone all the time, and he gets frustrated when things don't happen instantaneously, because we're so used to this now. I mean, when Jannette and I grew up, things didn't happen like that. We had to wait for them, like a camera, right? Remember when you used to travel and you would take pictures and have to wait for them to be developed?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, or even the Instamatic, you still had to sit down there and wave
wave it
before it came in. Yes, I know. You realize, of course, you're really dating us, right?
We are. It's okay. They already know. I know. It's okay. We're of that genre, and that's okay.
That's right. Exactly. Well, and I think part of, like you said, so I have this little model that I work with clients is, if there's resistance, what's underneath the resistance is fear. And in order to shift that, to go from resistance to willingness, you can't just make that leap, because if you do, it's usually a spiritual bypass, is what I call it. Like you're trying to say, I think I can, and then nothing changes.
Like kind of fake.
Underlying fear. And one of the things to do with that is to say, what's the need that's trying to be met? Because fear is just trying to help us. It's just trying to help us be safe. It's trying to help us be in the familiar, whatever it may be. So what's the need that's trying to be met? Gets us to kind of a neutral space. And then shifting to trust, because we have to trust ourselves or the universe or other people or something to do something different. Like you said, to move out of your comfort zone. So to go from what's the need that's trying to be met and how do I get that met in some other way? Because if you just try and override the fear, it's going to keep you hooked. It's going to keep you, spinning or hooked or whatever. So how do I get that need met some other way? And then what do I need to trust in order to take an action step on that? And when we get back into trusting ourselves, trusting the process, trusting who we have to support us, then we can start to move into willingness. So to go from resistance to willingness, you got to go through those steps or else it doesn't shift. And the reason that I'm mentioning this is because I think a lot of people have dreams. They want to move, like you said, or they want to invest, or they want to start a business. They want to do something that feels kind of scary. They've got all sorts of fears and concerns, and they don't go through that process, so they don't ever get back up to willingness to actually take action. So I think it really helps to have someone who can support you with that and hold your hand through the process. That's why it's so important to hire experts like Lauren to walk you through the steps, to help you with knowing what to do and what not to do, because otherwise
what not to do is just as important as what to do.
I think probably even more important ways. Yeah. And because otherwise then we're the blind leading the blind, and of course we're scared, and of course we don't take action because we don't know what the hell we're doing, and we spin in indecision and analysis paralysis. So one of the things that I would say, if you want to start a new business, if you want to invest in a business, if you want to move, if you want to do any of these kinds of life changes, one of the big things to do first is to get clear on why it matters to you. Because the more we're clear on why something really matters to us, the more likely we are to actually do it. And two, do it within a community or create community quickly. When we're plugged in and connected, we have a lot more courage, we have a lot more resources, we have connections, it makes things easier. And get support. Like, hire someone to help you with the process. If it's something that you are not comfortable with, haven't done before, guarantee getting the right support will save you time, will save you money, and will save you a lot of sleepless nights. So that'll help get that dream off the shelf and into reality.
Janette, you know the story about the ship guy, the where they had a leak on the ship? Have you heard this story?
No.
So there's a leak on a ship, and I guess the ship owners call somebody to come and fix the ship, and the somebody charges, whatever, $50 an hour.
Yeah.
And he spends hours and hours and hours looking for this leak on the ship, and he can't find the leak on the ship. And so they've now spent whatever they've spent to have this guy come and not diagnose the leak, and they still have a leak on the ship. Then they call this other person, maybe a lawyer, maybe an expert in something, maybe somebody who has credentials, and that person charges $10,000 an hour. Now, I do not charge $10,000 an hour. That would be a little over the top, even for me, but the $10,000 an hour person comes out, finds the leak on the ship, plugs the leak in 10 minutes, and it's a minimum hour charge, whatever, and they pay $10,000. And they're like, well, why are we paying you $10,000? Well, that's exactly why. Because you can be the blind leading the blind, or you can pay for the expertise and quality service and top-notch experts that you need. And this is why people like Janette are doing what they do, because they're teaching people how to find those experts and work with them, so you don't bang your head against the wall and spend $5 or $8 or $10 or $20 or $50,000 on somebody that doesn't know where to find the leak.
Yeah. Or 5 or 10 or 15 years putting your dreams on hold because you're trying to do it yourself, or you just can't get through the resistances and the fears. Like I said, I spent 25 years wanting to go to South America, and 25 years listening to my fears, my objections, and my excuses, until I finally had a different framework. And believe me, if I'd had a coach, that person would have been calling me on my shit a lot sooner. I would have moved through that a lot sooner and been there, right? 100%. But it's really about creating support in a lot of different ways. And there's a few tips that I'd like to offer. Having lived a mobile lifestyle, there's, I think, a few things that people wouldn't necessarily guess about moving or creating, whether you create a mobile lifestyle, which can look a lot of ways. It can look like living in an RV. I've got friends who live in RVs and move around the country and just go wherever they go, and they work from wherever they are. I spent 2 years living in one spot during COVID, and running my business from there, and then started traveling again. I've been roommates, I've done house and pet sitting, I've done variations on the theme to just be all sorts of different places, rented places in Mexico, rented places all over the place. So it can look however you want it to look, but there's a few things that if you decide you want to do that, whether it's moving permanently or being mobile in some way, maybe commuting, whatever it might be, is there's something that's a legitimate syndrome that's been diagnosed called decision fatigue. If you have to make a bunch of decisions, you start to get overwhelmed and you make bad decisions.
Absolutely.
So they did a study where they had people make a whole bunch of decisions, go into a room, there's a plate of cookies. They were told if they eat the cookies that they will lose their chance for this job or whatever it was. And if they didn't eat the cookies, then they would get an interview. The people who were asked to make a whole bunch of decisions before going into the room versus the ones who didn't, they were something like 89% ate the cookies. In the other group, only a few, because they were making bad decisions. You kind of get to a, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast, but you kind of get to an effort point, right? Where it's just like too many choices, too many decisions. So minimize them, do some planning, create some stability in some area. Yeah, you want this lifestyle for freedom, but freedom comes from structure. So just being, mobile doesn't mean you don't have structure. I have, work all day long wherever I am. So just because I move around a lot doesn't mean I don't have structure. So that's one thing. Minimize the number of decisions you have to make, because otherwise you start making really bad decisions. So find a way to create some aspect of your choices, delegate them, plan ahead, do something so that makes it easier. So that's one thing that people don't know about. And when they start making big changes, they sometimes screw up because they don't know that they are not choosing wisely. The second thing that I would say is you need to spend more time staying attached, meaning stay connected to the people in your life, in the past, your family, your friends, your loved ones. When we're off having adventures, when we're starting a new life, when we're moving, when we're doing any of that, we tend to be really focused on that. And so it can kind of be out of touch, out of mind, out of touch. And really, what ends up happening is all of a sudden you wake up and you find out you're disconnected from those people. You don't kind of have that day-to-day familiarity, and it can get really lonely. So it's really important to spend more time really focused on staying connected to the people you love, so you can stay grounded, so you can still have that kind of backdrop against which you're known. Because when you're moving around a lot, people don't know you. There's pros and cons to that. It can get very lonely. You can get kind of disconnected, and that can really undermine your business and the work you do. And again, the decisions you make. So more attention to that than you think you need. Otherwise it'll sneak up on you. And the other thing that I would say is, whether you're an introvert or not, get really good at plugging into community fast. It makes such a strategic difference to your business. So if I land somewhere, so like I'm in Yuma right now, and I'll be here for a month, and I have been and will be attending some of the classes. They have little happy hours here, going to networking meetings. I just went to a women's conference in Phoenix. Like, plug into the community so that you have resources to call on, people to help you with getting familiar with the community, people who can point you in the right direction on some of the things that you may not know. Like I got referrals for dentists, I got referrals for, hairstylists, etc. But what it does is it helps you land and feel more grounded. It's very practical in terms of who do you know who can help with this. but it also really helps you feel like you've arrived more, because you can be somewhere for a long time and never arrive there, never be part of it. So I've been in places where it's like, I've not really actually been there. I could be anywhere, right? So I would say really plug into the community, both in terms of finding out about where you're at and what's special about it, and the people. Those three things, whether you move to the US, move to another country, go mobile, really attend to those, and you will be happier and hit the ground running with your business faster than if you don't. So what's your experience with that, Lauren, when you watch clients that move to the US? Who are the ones that struggle, and does that make sense to you in terms of things that would help them to hit the
Yeah,
ground
for sure. I
faster?
mean, the reality is that you always see a consistent behaviors between those that make decisions and those that don't.
Yeah,
However, there is a little bit of an exception to that.
yeah,
We have seen a lot of times people make split instant decisions. Let's say they make a deposit on a
yeah,
call with us,
yeah,
and then they go back and they look at whatever and they change their minds.
yeah,
And so then they want a refund, which, our deposits are non-refundable, or they want this or whatever.
yeah,
And it's really like, so there's over deciding and under deciding, right? And listen, I'm guilty myself of making spontaneous decisions without necessarily thinking about the ins and outs and the costs and benefits. So it's like the 5-second rule. I think that Mel Robbins nailed it. It's not necessarily 5 seconds, maybe it's 5 hours, maybe it's 5 pages of notes, maybe it's whatever. But just you do need to stop and think, or you can get into that decision overwhelmed, because I have trouble making small decisions.
mhm,
And then the small decisions pile up. So I agree with everything that you said, and I think at the end of the day that it's very important when you're moving from one country to another. That's a huge decision. There's a
mhm,
lot of things involved. You're not just choosing which gym to go to, which, I mean, you can choose a gym and change your mind. Once you move and sell your house and move to a different country, it's not that easy to just turn back.
mhm,
And yes, I agree about the community part as well, because without community, you have no connection. And without connection, what are you? Then it goes back to number 2, spend more time staying attached to the people in your life. So,
yeah,
well, Janette is talking about detaching from stuff.
yeah,
She's talking about attaching to people. And I
yeah.
think that those attachments are the relationship builders that lead to success over the short and long term, because you know that you have people in your life that you can trust, and that's important.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And then that way, if you're staying, if you're minimizing the decision fatigue, then you're making better decisions. If you're staying connected with the people you love, like I said, home is where the heart is, or heart is where the home is, then you're staying connected to your heart as well, and keeping that friendship, love, support in your life, and then creating that productive community really does support you in moving quicker in terms of deployment, finding the right resources, and really also the more you connect with community, you're going to learn things like little cultural nuances, because sometimes Canadians forget, and in my experience, Americans definitely have a different experience, that there are differences between Canadians and Americans, big differences, right? And you have to figure out what the cultural nuances are. You can't start the same business in the same way in Canada as you can in the US.
no, not at
Different
all.
marketing approach, you need a different tone, you need different positioning, even for the same business. Like, it just doesn't work. If you're a coach and you're speaking in Canada, you speak differently than if you're a coach speaking in the US, if you want to be effective, right? So you got to find out what those differences are so your business can thrive and do the right kind of marketing that works in that market. So big differences between Canada and the US, even though we're in the same continent, and many people think that we're very similar, but no.
But so is Mexico, in the same continent
Yeah,
and completely different. But you know what? You're right. one thing that is a common misnomer is people think that it's so easy to transition from Canada to the US.
Yeah.
And you know what, the difference is, I'm still amazed, and it's 22 years later.
Yeah.
It's a completely different mindset. Look at the banking system. Look what's going on in the US with the banking system. This would never happen in Canada. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a completely different way of looking at money, at looking at relationships, at looking at people, at looking at family. And money is a big one. Credit, people in the US living on credit. So it's just, again, it's important to work with people that you trust, that have your back, that look after you and really care about your outcomes. They don't just care about how much money they're charging you. And that's something that Janette does very, very well. Janette, I'm going to sign off in a moment, but before I do, I know that you have a gift, which we will share in the show notes, but what is your gift, please?
Well, I just want to offer people a conversation about if you're thinking of creating a different lifestyle, so moving somewhere or whatever, and you just want to talk through some of the pros and cons, some of your concerns, some of the questions you may have about that. I like literally have lived in, I've lost track of how many places, but I've lived all over the US. I've lived in different countries and so forth. I'm happy to just have that conversation with you. Sometimes you just want to talk to someone who's been there, done that. So complimentary consultation, no obligation, no big pitch or anything. I just want to support you in creating that dream and saying yes to yourself and stepping into whatever that may look like. And, maybe you might have questions about how to start your business. Maybe you might have questions about a lifestyle shift. So you can book a complimentary consultation with me. There's a link for the calendar there, my calendar. We'll have a what's next call for you to take that next step. And, I know a lot of people don't book consultations because you think it's going to be a sales pitch or whatever. Truly, this is to support you in clarifying what do you want, what might get in your way, and what will support you in bridging that gap between where you are and where you want to go. My goal is to get more people living from their purpose-led life so that we can all benefit. And then if I can help you, sure, I'll tell you, we can book another call or whatever, if I can support you with something that you're doing. And I would just say, I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. If you've got some dream that you've been thinking about for a long time and have been putting on the shelf, then my question is, if not now, when? When are you going to stop letting the BS stories stop you? Because they are BS, both bullshit and belief system. Okay. And it is time to create the life you want. Get community, get plugged in, get support, someone to hold your hand as you make the leap, and stop buying the stories and start saying, how do I make this work?
Thank you, Janette. Thank you for listening to us today. I thank Janette for joining me and always supporting me. And long before I ever hired her as a coach, she's been there for me. And she really will give you value in that consultation. She is not one to sell. I had to beg her to actually charge me money, literally. So on that note, I will thank you again for joining us today at Investing Across Borders, the podcast where we teach you how to invest, live, work, and play across borders. And we can be found on every medium under Investing Across Borders, from Facebook to Twitter to TikTok to LinkedIn. Just look up Investing Across Borders, investingacrossborders.net, and you'll find us. And we would love to connect with you. We really love what we do, working with Canadians and others from every country around the world to get into the US, to invest in real estate, to buy businesses, and to get immigration visas. So please reach out to us, hello@investingacrossborders.net, and we will look forward to connecting with you soon. Thank you again, Janette. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye, Laura.